Addiction doesn't always look the way you expect. It's not just needles, bottles, or pills. Sometimes it's the things we use every single day. A screen, a routine, a craving that starts small and grows quietly. In this video, we're uncovering 5 real cases where addiction, whether to a substance, a behavior, or even technology, led to deeply disturbing and unexpected deaths. These stories aren't just tragic, they're chilling reminders of how something ordinary can spiral into something deadly.
Where we have done a deep dive into this case. John Sweeney was Dominique's boyfriend. He strangled her to death.
It was October 1982 when the rising life of a young actress came to a brutal, heartbreaking end. She had just begun to carve her place in Hollywood, fresh off a role in the hit horror film Poltergeist, her name finally being whispered with promise. Dominique Ellen Dunne was born in Santa Monica, California, the daughter of Hollywood royalty. Her father, Dominick Dunne, was a famed writer and producer. Her brother, Griffin, would go on to direct and act in major films. By the early 1980s, she'd appeared in shows like Family and Breaking Away, and then came her breakthrough, the role of Dana Freeling, the teenage daughter in Poltergeist. She was on the cusp of something bigger. She had no idea the real horror was still ahead. In 1981, she met John Thomas Sweeney, a sous chef at the upscale restaurant Ma Maison. Their relationship burned fast. Within weeks, they moved in together, and that's when things began to unravel. Behind closed doors, the charm slipped away. What replaced it was something darker: jealous rages, sudden mood swings, terrifying violence. He wasn't just possessive, he was dangerous. By August 1982, the signs were no longer subtle. In one violent outburst, Sweeney tore clumps of Dominique's hair from her head. She ran to her mother's house, trembling and terrified, but he followed, banging on the windows, shouting. Friends begged her to stay away, and for a while she did. But like so many stories of abuse, she returned. Love and fear, guilt and hope. It's a vicious mix, and Sweeney wasn't done. A month later, he attacked her again. This time, he choked her until she could barely breathe. A friend witnessed her gasping for air afterward, her voice reduced to a hoarse whisper. October 30th, 1982. Dominique was at her West Hollywood home, rehearsing with fellow actor David Packer for a new miniseries. The evening was ordinary, lines being practiced, roles explored. Then the phone rang. It was Sweeney. He was coming over. Despite everything, she agreed to step outside and talk. Inside the house, David Packer waited. Minutes passed. Then he heard it. A sharp smack, a scream, then a sickening thud. Alarmed, he tried calling the police, but they told him it was out of their jurisdiction. With no help coming, he stepped outside and found Sweeney crouched over Dominique's limp body, his hands still on her, his voice eerily calm. "I killed my girlfriend." Paramedics rushed Dominique to Cedars-Sinai. 5 days on life support and then silence. On November 4th, her family let her go. She was 22, but the horror wasn't over. Sweeney was charged with first-degree murder. The trial should have been straightforward. The confession, the history of abuse, the eyewitnesses. But what unfolded in court stunned the nation. The defense argued it wasn't premeditated, that he didn't remember strangling her, that it was a heat-of-the-moment mistake. Key evidence was buried. Testimony from his previous girlfriend, who had been hospitalized after multiple beatings, was ruled too prejudicial for the jury to hear. Dominique's friends and mother, who could have confirmed the threats and abuse, were silenced too, their words dismissed as hearsay. The jury never saw the full picture. On September 21st, 1983, the verdict came. Not guilty of second-degree murder. Instead, Sweeney was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and misdemeanor assault. The maximum sentence was 6.5 years. He served just 2.5 before walking free in 1986. Free, Sweeney vanished after his release, changed his name, moved cities.
Too much chewing gum may have played a role in the sudden death of a 19-year-old in Wales in June of 2011.
It was June 3rd, 2011, in Llanelli, South Wales. 19-year-old Samantha Jenkins had spent it out in town with her younger sister, Sophie. Nothing about her seemed wrong. Nothing hinted that the next few hours would change everything. Later that evening, back at home, Samantha complained of a stomach ache after drinking a bottle of soda. "It's gone right through me," she told her mother, Maria. It sounded like a simple case of dehydration. Maria told her to rest, maybe sip some water. But minutes later, Samantha tried to lift her water bottle and couldn't. Her hand trembled. "I can't even pick it up," she said. Confused and concerned, Maria suggested she lie down and get a quilt from upstairs. Then came the sound no parent ever wants to hear, a heavy thud. Maria and Sophie rushed toward it. At the top of the stairs, Samantha stood frozen, her voice shaking. Is this what it's like to die? I feel paralyzed. Then she collapsed. Again. What followed was chaos. She was rushed to Prince Philip Hospital. Doctors worked quickly, placing her in an induced coma. Seizures wouldn't stop. Her brain was swelling. Blood tests revealed something alarming. Her salt levels, sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, were critically low. Doctors tried everything, fluids and electrolytes, emergency interventions, but nothing worked. 3 days later, on June 6th, Samantha took her final breath, cradled in her mother's arms. She was only 19. At first, the cause was labeled natural, but Maria couldn't accept that. Her daughter had been healthy, active, bright. She hadn't suffered from any known medical conditions, so why did her body suddenly crash? Doctors were puzzled too. Some speculated bizarre possibilities. Chemical exposure, maybe something ingested. Household products like nail polish remover were even mentioned. But no one could explain what really happened. There were no answers. Until Maria started going through Samantha's things. In bags and in drawers, in jacket pockets, everywhere. Chewing gum wrappers, dozens of them. Samantha had been chewing gum constantly, and not just any gum. Sugar-free, the kind packed with artificial sweeteners like sorbitol and aspartame. Maria began researching. What she found was terrifying. In high doses, sorbitol works as a powerful laxative. It can strip the body of fluids, drain it of vital minerals. Aspartame, though approved for use, has long been a subject of debate, and if someone consumes it daily, obsessively, in large quantities, it can become dangerous. Maria pleaded with officials for a new investigation. At first, she was denied. The cause had already been marked as natural, but she kept pushing, year after year. And finally, in 2015, 4 long years later, an inquest was granted. At Swansea Coroner's Court, pathologist Dr. Paul Griffiths gave his findings. What he discovered during the post-mortem stunned the courtroom. 4 to 5 large, bright green lumps of chewing gum still sat in Samantha's stomach. He said he'd never seen anything like it. Her electrolyte levels, he confirmed, were severely depleted. Samantha had been chewing up to 14 pieces of gum per day, around 16.8 grams of sweeteners daily, a heavy dose for someone her size. According to Dr. Griffiths, that kind of intake could absolutely contribute to fluid loss and, over time, cause exactly the kind of fatal complications Samantha suffered: seizures, swelling, and finally collapse. Maria finally had something close to an answer. She still speaks out today, telling Samantha's story to anyone who will listen, warning parents, teens, and everyday consumers about how easy it is to overlook the risks of things that feel harmless, things like diet drinks, sweeteners, or sugar-free gum.
Gia Karanji's name is a name that when you hear in the modeling industry, it's like a cautionary tale, right? It's a tale of sadness, tragedy, and extreme loss.
It was January 1978 in Philadelphia, and a small nightclub was pulsing with music. 17-year-old Gia Karangi wasn't like the rest. She wasn't trying to charm anyone. That night, she caught the eye of Morris Tannenbaum, a local hairdresser and part-time photographer. He asked if he could take her picture. The photos Maurice took floated from hand to hand, eventually landing in front of Arthur Elgort, a top fashion photographer in New York. Within months, Gia had left Philadelphia and moved to the city. It didn't take long for her to break through. By the end of that year, she was the industry's new obsession. She signed with Wilhelmina Cooper, a former supermodel turned agency powerhouse. But Wilhelmina wasn't just a manager. She became something Gia hadn't had in years, a steady presence, a kind of mother figure, one Gia clung to more tightly than anyone realized. Gia's real mother had walked out of her life when she was 11. The wound never really healed. But the fashion world didn't ask about wounds. It only wanted beauty. And Gia had it in abundance. She was fierce, rebellious, effortlessly photogenic. Brands like Versace, Dior, Yves Saint Laurent, and Armani scrambled for her. She fronted campaigns for Maybelline, Vidal Sassoon, Levi's. Francesco Scavullo, one of the most respected photographers of the time, called her unforgettable. She didn't follow rules, she didn't play it safe, and that made her electric. But while she was redefining beauty on the outside, something inside was starting to slip. Gia wore old jeans, men's shirts, and heavy boots. She loved women and never tried to hide it. Her first real relationship was with Sharon Beverly, a woman she met at a gay club back in Philly. And then came Sandy Linter, another model, another obsession. In one of Gia's most iconic shoots, she posed nude with Sandy. The photo became famous, but the relationship behind it was volatile, unbalanced, and left Gia emotionally raw. She often fell for the women she worked with, but those feelings weren't always returned. Still, the world adored her. By the time she was 18, Gia was earning over $100,000 a year. By 1979, she was gracing the covers of Vogue and Cosmopolitan. Some called her the first true supermodel, but behind the glamour, Gia was slipping into darkness. She had already begun using by then marijuana, pills, whatever dulled the edges. And in places like Studio 54, temptation was everywhere. The drugs got stronger. Once, during a Vogue shoot in 1980, she simply climbed out of a window and vanished. That same year, Wilhelmina Cooper died. For Gia, it was like losing her anchor. Whatever balance she had was gone. The substances took over. Her face became puffy. Her arms bore track marks. During one Cosmo cover shoot, Scavullo had her hide her arms behind her back. The dress she wore wasn't picked for fashion. It was chosen to cover the damage. In 1981, she was hospitalized for an infected wound. That same year, she was arrested for driving under the influence. She switched modeling agencies, but the calls stopped coming. Her final major job was a Vogue shoot in 1982. After that, silence. Gia returned to Philadelphia. She entered rehab. For 7 months, she was clean. She worked retail, then in a nursing home cafeteria. But the industry had moved on. The spotlight had turned elsewhere, and Gia, still aching, still restless, began to spiral again. By late 1985, the money was gone. The fame had vanished. She was living on the edge in Atlantic City, sleeping outside, trading intimacy for survival. One night, she was attacked. In December, she was hospitalized with pneumonia. Doctors then discovered something far worse. Gia had contracted AIDS. Her body was already failing. In October 1986, she was admitted to a hospital in Philadelphia. On November 18th, she died. She was only 26. Her mother was by her side. No one from the fashion world came to the funeral. Francesco Scavullo, the photographer who once championed her, didn't even know she had passed until weeks later. Years later, in 1998, HBO released a film about her life. Gia, starring Angelina Jolie, captured the raw pain and defiant beauty that defined her. Jolie once said, "Gia didn't need anything to stand out. She was the drug." In December of 1986, a gruesome scene unfolded in one of Los Angeles' wealthiest neighborhoods, and even hardened detectives struggled to make sense of it. An actress, long forgotten by Hollywood but once romantically tied to a king, had been brutally murdered inside her crumbling hillside mansion. Her name was Susan Cabot, but before the horror, she had been Harriet Pearl Shapiro, a girl from the Bronx abandoned by her father and left motherless after her mother was committed to a psychiatric hospital. Shuffled through foster homes, she grew up in shadows, in silence. But somehow, from that chaos, a performer emerged. Susan started as a children's book illustrator, her art full of innocence she'd never known herself. Then came singing gigs, then Hollywood. She signed with Universal Pictures and became a familiar face in westerns like Tomahawk and Gunsmoke. Her beauty was classic, almost haunting, but her biggest splash came in the world of cult horror, starring in Roger Corman's The Wasp Woman, a film that would eerily mirror her own descent. By the 1960s, the spotlight dimmed. She slipped away from the public eye, retreating into a grand but deteriorating home tucked away in California's hills. And inside that house, Susan unraveled. The years weren't kind. Depression swallowed her. Paranoia twisted her thoughts. She became reclusive, suspicious of everyone. Her only connection to the outside world was her son, Timothy Roman, a boy who'd known pain before he could form words. Born with pituitary dwarfism, Timothy underwent controversial treatments using hormones taken from cadaver glands. He grew, yes, but the cost was horrifying. Years later, those same hormone batches were linked to Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, a degenerative and fatal brain disorder. And as Susan's grip on reality loosened, Timothy's mind, too, began to fracture. Then came the night of December 10th, 1986. A 911 call was placed. A burglary, Timothy claimed. A masked man had broken in, attacked them. When paramedics arrived, Timothy stood calmly outside. The house was drowning in filth, rotting food, garbage, a suffocating stench of decay. And in the bedroom, Susan. Her body was found on the bed, blood soaking through a lavender nightgown. A linen cloth was wrapped around her shattered skull. Blood painted the walls like a scene from one of her old horror movies. Only this time, the violence was real. Timothy's story began to crack almost immediately. There was no sign of forced entry, no evidence of an intruder. Police found the murder weapon hidden in his room, and then came the confession. He said she'd attacked him, said she woke up screaming, delusional, wild, lunging at him with a scalpel and a barbell. He claimed he acted in fear, that he struck back, that he didn't mean to kill her, but the damage had been done. The trial wouldn't begin until 1989, but when it did, it drew intense media attention, not for who Susan was in her prime, but for how deeply she'd fallen. Prosecutors charged Timothy with second-degree murder, but as the courtroom was flooded with images of the decaying home, with testimony of Susan's mental illness and Timothy's compromised brain, the narrative shifted. It wasn't just a murder, it was the slow-motion collapse of a family warped by trauma, failed by medicine, and forgotten by fame. Timothy's lawyers didn't try to paint him as a monster. Instead, they showed the jury a life steeped in desperation. They described a boy who had grown up in a prison of fear, watching his mother spiral into hallucinations, paranoia, and rage. Pediatric reports backed it up. Susan's emotional instability had begun harming Timothy before he was even a teenager. Judge Darlene Shemp wept during the trial. Evidence included a videotape, one that captured the rotting interiors of Susan's mansion in such visceral detail that even courtroom veterans were shaken. It wasn't just a house, it was a tomb for the living. On October 10, 1989, Timothy was found guilty, not of murder, but of involuntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation. With time served, he walked free. It was a night in 1975. In Venice, California, the streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't hint at tragedy. Somewhere under those dim streetlights, a rising star in American theater and television was walking to her car, completely unaware that she had minutes left to live. Barbara Colby wasn't just another actress. She was radiant. Born on July 2, 1939, she'd found her passion for theater in high school back in New Orleans. Her talent was undeniable, her energy infectious. After graduating in 1957, she earned a scholarship to Bard College and even spent a semester studying at the Sorbonne in Paris. Like so many dreamers, she moved to Manhattan, juggling waitressing and secretarial jobs while chasing the stage with everything she had. And it paid off. By 1964, Barbara had audiences captivated in 6 characters in search of an author, and a year later, she debuted on Broadway. She glowed in every role, from classic Shakespearean parts to modern dramas. But it wasn't just her acting, it was her presence, her husky voice. That booming, full-body laugh, the way she lit up a room. People remembered her, admired her, loved her, and television noticed too. By the early 1970s, Barbara was working on both coasts, appearing in popular series. Her guest role as Sherry on The Mary Tyler Moore Show made such an impression that she was cast as Julie Erskine in a brand new spin-off called Phyllis, starring Cloris Leachman. It was her moment, her breakthrough. She had just finished filming the first 3 episodes. She was on the brink of something big. Then, everything stopped. On July 24, 1975, Barbara had spent the evening doing what she loved, teaching an acting class. The session wrapped up around 11:50 p.m. She and fellow actor James Kiernan walked together to their car, parked in a nearby lot. It wasn't unusual for actors to linger there and chat under the streetlights. Another friend, Ron Rifkin, usually joined them, but that night he stayed home sick, a twist of fate that likely saved his life. As Barbara and James neared their vehicle, a light-colored van pulled up. No words, no warning, no signs of a struggle. 2 men stepped out and opened fire. A single bullet struck Barbara, through her left arm, into her chest, puncturing her lung. She collapsed. James, too, was shot. A nearby resident heard the screams, the shots, and called the police. When officers arrived minutes later, Barbara was gone. She was just 36 years old. James was still alive, barely. He was rushed to David Brotman Memorial Hospital, but he died at 1:32 a.m. In his final moments, he told police what he could. He didn't know the men. The attack was fast, silent, and terrifyingly deliberate. Authorities launched a manhunt. 6 young men were arrested and questioned, but nothing stuck. No motive, no link, no justice. Was it a case of mistaken identity, a random act of violence, or something far more personal, far more sinister? Decades later, no one knows. The murder stunned Hollywood. Her colleagues were devastated. The world never got to see what Barbara Colby was truly capable of. The first 3 episodes of Phyllis aired posthumously that September. Viewers watched her on screen, smiling, glowing, unaware that the woman they were falling in love with had already been taken. It was July 2010 in Chelmsford, Essex. In the hospital room at Broomfield, there was 41-year-old Sharon Mevlimler, a mother of 4, barely recognizable from the woman she once was. Just weeks earlier, she'd smiled through a birthday celebration. But they weren't. Her body was giving out. By the end of that day, Sharon was gone. When Sharon married Bueland in 1989, she was just 8 stone, full of life. But after having children, something in her shifted. She spoke openly about the postnatal depression that crept in, the numbness that followed. Food became her comfort. It started with small snacks to ease the lows, but gradually that turned into something darker. Fast food, boxes of sweets, entire tins of chocolates, devoured in the quiet hours of the night. By the early 2000s, Sharon was consuming up to 12,000 calories a day, 6 times the recommended amount. Her body ballooned, her mobility vanished. By 2003, she weighed 35 stone. Walking became impossible. She relied on a scooter, and then even that became too difficult. She needed help with everything. Her husband left his job to become her full-time carer. Her children, still young, helped lift her onto the commode. Sharon once admitted they hadn't shared physical closeness in over 10 years. What they had now was survival. She pleaded with doctors. A gastric bypass felt like her only chance, but they told her it was too risky. She needed to lose weight first. In 2004, she was admitted to a specialist clinic in London. The NHS covered the cost, £5,000 per week. It didn't help. She couldn't stomach the restricted food. She left after 24 weeks, heavier than when she entered. She gave up. But a second chance came in 2009. She was finally approved for the surgery on the condition that she follow a strict milk-based liquid diet. For 2 weeks, she stuck to it. And she lost over a stone. In June, she underwent the operation. It lasted 3.5 hours. And at first, it worked. She came home lighter. She was losing more than a stone per month. She even went swimming in a backyard pool with her children. For the first time in years, there was hope. But hope for Sharon didn't last. Recovery was grueling. Every 30 minutes, she had to eat tiny portions of liquid food. It left her drained. She craved the old comfort foods, the fried chicken, the chocolate, the takeaway. She admitted in interviews that she regretted the surgery. Said if she had just stuck with dieting, maybe she could have still had the occasional treat. By November, things took a turn. She could no longer move her legs, then her hands. No one knew why. She was transferred to a nursing home, but even there, the cravings didn't stop. Her family, trying to cheer her up, brought her fast food. Nurses whispered that the food was making things worse. Her condition spiraled. She developed sores from lying in bed too long. The infections spread. Her blood grew toxic. By June 2010, she slipped into a coma. Doctors rushed to save her, and though she was still technically obese, they said she was malnourished. Her body was starving for what it couldn't absorb. She woke up, but the damage was done. Her hair was falling out. She couldn't speak. She couldn't move. She told her family the surgery had failed her. Even after losing 23 stone, she felt no better. No freer, no closer to the life she had once known. Then, in July, her heart stopped. She died in that hospital bed, surrounded by the very people who had loved her most. It was June 28, 2008 in New York City. Ruslana Korshunova was just 20 years old. Born in Kazakhstan and raised in Russia, Ruslana had been discovered at 15 and quickly rose through the ranks, gracing the pages of Vogue, Elle, and walking the runways in Paris. Her 21st birthday was only days away, and she had no idea the clock was quietly counting down her final hours. That morning, she stepped out to buy some fruit. Around noon, she spoke to her boyfriend, Mark Kaminsky. They were supposed to attend a birthday party that night. At 12:19 p.m., she logged into her social media for what would be the last time. Then she made a phone call, not to her boyfriend, her mother, or a close friend, but to Vladimir Voronov, a man with whom she had a complicated past. They had met at a Moscow party back in 2007. He introduced her to a group called Rose of the World, a self-help organization that promised clarity and emotional healing, but behind the sleek branding was something far more troubling. Its seminars cost nearly $900 and were led by Vladislav Diz, a Russian millionaire who flaunted his wealth online but ran sessions that sounded more like emotional warfare. Loud music, screaming, forced confessions, psychological intensity masked as breakthroughs. One journalist who infiltrated the group later described it as disturbing and manipulative. Ruslana, who had already been emotionally worn from non-stop work, travel, and the performative party scene, fell deep into it. She cried in sessions. She opened up about losing her father. She invited fellow model Anastasia Drozdova to join. A year later, Anastasia died too, under eerily similar circumstances. Back in New York by spring 2008, something had shifted. Her once bright energy turned erratic. Friends said she seemed distant, fragile. Her posts online became cryptic. She missed jobs. She lost weight. She was pulling away, and then there was something else, something darker, hidden behind her green eyes and model-perfect smile. "Even if I'm not here anymore," she once told Vladimir, "the whole world will talk about me." On the day she died, she called him twice, first to say she wasn't feeling well, then again, minutes later, but he didn't pick up. By 2:30 p.m., it was over. Ruslana fell from the 9th-floor balcony of her apartment at 130 Water Street. A concierge would later describe seeing her broken body on the pavement. Small, fragile, pitiful, her arms and neck shattered. But what stood out the most was her hair. It looked uneven, as if someone had hastily cut it. A Moscow mortician later confirmed it hadn't been torn from the fall. It had been chopped, deliberately. There was no sign of a struggle. Surveillance footage showed no one entering or leaving the building. The NYPD ruled it a suicide. Case closed. But Ruslana's mother, Valentina, refused to believe it. She said her daughter had been fine, happy even. Just the night before, she'd watched a movie with an ex-boyfriend who later said it felt like she was quietly saying goodbye. She had also asked Vladimir for money. 10,000 rubles, about $400, 10 days before her death. For what? She never said. In 2006, when Ruslana was only 18, she flew on Jeffrey Epstein's private jet to his island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Her name now appears in 2024 court documents confirming that trip. What happened there? No one knows. She never spoke about it, not publicly. By the time she met Vladimir and entered Rose of the World, she was already unraveling. Experts later said the group functioned like a cult, addictive, emotionally coercive, designed to break you down, then sell you the illusion of being healed. Peter Pomerantsev, the journalist who went undercover, called her the perfect victim. And another expert, Rick Allen Ross, warned that groups like these prey on people in distress. The organization denied any involvement. Vladislav Diz quietly shut it down, only to relaunch it years later under a new name, still offering expensive breakthrough seminars to the vulnerable and broken. Ruslana was buried in Moscow on July 7, 2008. Her mother chose the city because, for a time, it had made her daughter happy. It was July 26, 2022, in the quiet city of Ribeirão Preto, Brazil. Inside a small rented house behind his family's property, 55-year-old Valdir Segato woke up for his birthday, a day meant for celebration. But instead, he was alone, clutching his chest, panic setting in. For 10 years, Valdir had chased one goal: size, not strength, not health, just the image. He wanted to be noticed, to be unforgettable. Online, they called him the Hulk, He-Man, the Monster. He loved those names. He needed them. He flexed for the camera, oiled up and swollen, his muscles grotesquely inflated like balloons stretched too far. The internet watched in fascination, but Valdir didn't care why they looked, as long as they didn't look away. But that isn't where his story began. Years earlier, Valdir had been someone else entirely, a man lost in addiction. Locals had a cruel nickname for him, Skinny Dog. He hated it. He later admitted there were days he didn't eat, days he didn't know if he'd survive. So he made a decision. He quit the substances, joined a gym, and decided to rebuild himself, literally. Muscles grew, but not fast enough. The body he craved seemed out of reach. That's when he found Synthol, a dangerous cosmetic oil mix that didn't make you stronger, just bigger. It filled his arms, chest, and shoulders like balloon animals stretched to bursting. He started injecting regularly. The results were grotesque, unnatural, and impossible to ignore. To Valdir, that was the whole point. He became a spectacle. Online, he called himself Valdir Synthol. TikTok, Instagram, millions watched. One video alone racked up over 5.8 million views. He flexed, smiled, danced, and spoke about his body like it was his proudest creation. Some cheered, others mocked, but all eyes were on him. In those moments, he wasn't the forgotten man from the streets. He was somebody. But offline, Valdir's life was quiet, isolated. He had no wife, no children, no close friends, beyond the occasional neighbor. One of them, Moises, said Valdir lived in a tiny house behind their family's home for over 15 years, rarely had visitors. Doctors had warned him again and again. They said his obsession could kill him. Synthol could cause nerve damage, blockages, infections, even fatal heart issues. He didn't care. Doctors tell me to stop, he said in 2016, but it's my decision. I use it because I want to. Friends tried to intervene. Fernando, a longtime companion, said he begged Valdir to stop. But he was happy like that, Fernando said. It was his risk. That risk caught up to him on the morning of his birthday. Around 6 a.m., there was frantic knocking on Moises's door. Valdir was outside, gasping for air, drenched in sweat, his hands trembling. "Help me because I'm dying," he pleaded. They rushed him to the nearest emergency clinic. But the moment they stepped into the reception area, Valdir collapsed, right there on the floor, on his birthday. Medical staff rushed to revive him, but it was already too late. Valdir Segato died at 55, alone after years of pushing his body to its absolute limit for attention, for admiration, for a sense of worth. When the news broke, his followers were stunned. His final TikTok, posted only a day earlier, suddenly filled with comments. "Rest in peace, monster. You didn't deserve this. Why didn't anyone stop him?" He once said bodybuilding helped him escape the ghosts of his past. Addiction, loss, emptiness. But that escape became a prison. And in the end, that image consumed him. It was August 3rd, 2005 in Daegu, South Korea. That night, 28-year-old Lee Seung-seop walked quietly into a dimly lit internet cafe tucked between other storefronts along a busy street. Lee picked a corner seat. He logged into StarCraft, and he never intended to stop. He wasn't anyone special, at least not on paper. A former boiler repairman, quiet, soft-spoken, thick glasses, usually seen in a plain gray uniform. He lived alone, kept to himself, and didn't cause trouble. But behind that quiet face was a growing obsession. Hours spent in internet cafes, known in South Korea as PC bangs, were his escape. For just $1 an hour, he could disappear. What began as a hobby quickly twisted into something else, something much harder to walk away from. Over time, Lee began to slip. First, it was skipped meals, then missed days at work. His friends noticed, then his boss. Eventually, he was fired. Around the same time, his girlfriend, also a gamer, walked out. On that fateful Wednesday, Lee sat down at a computer and launched into a marathon, hour after hour, day after day. He didn't move much, just the occasional bathroom break, a quick nap on a makeshift bed in the corner. For nearly 50 hours straight, he played. The only sound in the room was the soft clicking of keyboards and the low hum of fans keeping the PCs from overheating. By Friday evening, Lee's body was starting to give up. His mother hadn't heard from him, and her worry had grown into panic. She reached out to his old co-workers, asking them to check on him. They found him still sitting at the terminal, eyes fixed on the screen. He looked terrible, but when they asked if he was okay, he simply told them he'd leave after he finished the game. He never did. Before the match ended, Lee collapsed. One of the gamers nearby, Kim Jin-yu, recalled watching him fall, his head snapping back, eyes shut, face slack. At first, no one moved. It wasn't unusual for someone to doze off at a terminal, but this was different. An ambulance was called. He was rushed to Daegu Fatima Hospital. The doctors said it was heart failure brought on by exhaustion and severe dehydration. His body had simply run out of fuel. In 2005, South Korea had one of the most connected populations on Earth. Over 70% of households had broadband internet. Online games like StarCraft weren't just popular, they were a way of life. Among people aged 9 to 39, gaming was more common than watching TV. The gaming industry earned over $1 billion that year, and for many these games offered more than entertainment, they offered identity. After his death, South Korean officials scrambled. They called for reforms, insisting this wasn't about a game. It was about health, neglect, and mental collapse. They started enforcing curfews, banning minors from entering PC bangs after 10 p.m. Developers added on-screen warnings to encourage players to take breaks. Health workers even began checking in at cafes. But the damage was already done. More cases followed, more headlines, including one horrifying incident where a baby died after being left alone while her parents played an online game for hours. People began to realize this wasn't just a South Korean problem. It was a mirror, showing us what can happen when a digital world becomes more real, more rewarding than life itself. It was 1999, in Jundiai, a quiet town tucked away in Sao Paulo, Brazil. 13-year-old Ana Carolina Reston was just a schoolgirl with big dreams and a delicate frame. That day, she stepped onto the stage of a small-town beauty contest, her parents cheering from the crowd, unaware that this crown would be the start of a dream that would one day turn into a nightmare. She won, Queen of Jundiai. It wasn't a major title, but to Anna, it meant everything. Soon she dropped her last name and set her sights on the modeling world. Her family lived modestly. Her father worked for a German firm, her mother sold jewelry, but when a talent scout offered agency connections for £100, they scraped together the money. Modeling came naturally to Anna. She was photogenic, poised, and driven. Though barely over 5'6", she added a few inches on paper, a white lie that opened real doors. By 2003, she was working with Elite, one of the world's top agencies. That same year, at just 18, she flew alone to Guangzhou, China for her first international shoot. There, at a casting call, someone told her she looked fat. Just one word, but it shattered her. In a letter to her mother, Anna wrote she felt small and lost. That single comment triggered a downward spiral. Anna began to change. She started eating less, withdrawing from others. Friends and colleagues noticed. Journalist Laura Ancona recalled meeting her in 2004 and finding her distant and gaunt. Anna was surviving on juices, apples, and tomatoes. Behind the Fashion Week glamour, she was falling apart. Her aunt later said girls were being sent abroad with no support. Dr. Marco Antonio Di Tommaso noted the dangerous extremes models faced, starving themselves, fainting backstage, abusing pills, all to stay thin. Anna, now her family's main income source, felt immense pressure. Their savings had been stolen. Her father's health declined. She took a job in Mexico despite warnings she wouldn't fit the market's body standards. She returned home disillusioned, and her appearance shocked her family. In 2006, she stopped modeling and took small promo jobs. By October, her health collapsed. At just 88 pounds, her organs began to fail. On November 15, 2006, at 7:10 a.m., Anna Carolina Reston died. She was only 21. The official cause? Multiple organ failure, infection, and kidney problems. But those who knew her knew the real cause, the crushing pressure to be perfect in a world that rewarded thinness and silence. Her death made global headlines. Some in the industry deflected blame. Others finally began to speak out. Slowly, reforms emerged. But for Anna, it was too late. Her mother now runs a small jewelry shop in her memory. Behind the counter, Anna's portrait smiles, forever young. She's in the ground now, her mother says. I don't know how to live without her. She was my right arm. Anna dreamed of being a supermodel, and for a moment she was. But behind every polished photo was a girl disappearing under the weight of an industry that measured her worth by how little space she took up. And heartbreakingly, she is far from the only one.
Crane had scheduled a noontime appointment. He didn't show up. An actress friend came here looking for him. She found his body still in bed.
It was June 29, 1978. Inside a modest apartment complex, that illusion shattered. A lifeless body had been discovered, not just any man, but someone millions once invited into their homes through their television screens. The corpse was battered, bound. The scene? Unimaginable. Blood smeared the walls, ceiling, and bed. Whoever had done this didn't just want Bob Crane dead. They wanted it to be personal. You might not know his name now, but in the 1960s, Bob Crane was America's charismatic darling. Born Robert Edward Crane in 1928, he had a natural flair for performance. By 11, he was a drumming prodigy. Soon, he transitioned into radio, charming listeners from New York to Los Angeles with his quick wit. In LA, he became the voice of the #1 morning show. But his leap into television changed everything. In 1965, he took on the role of Colonel Hogan in Hogan's Heroes, a sitcom improbably set in a German Wuntu prison camp. Against all odds, it was a hit. Crane was nominated for 2 Emmys. He had it all: fame, a smiling public image, and the adoration of millions. But as his fame soared, his private life spiraled into darkness. When the show ended in 1971, so did the magic. Crane's career stalled, his acting gigs dried up, and behind the scenes, his personal habits took a troubling turn. He became obsessed with filming his sexual encounters, often with the help of his closest friend, John Henry Carpenter. Carpenter wasn't just a sidekick. He was the supplier, the enabler. A video equipment salesman, Carpenter traveled with Crane, helping him set up and record his private escapades. The two would meet women, some of whom later claimed they had no idea they were being filmed. By 1978, Crane was trying to claw his way back to relevance, performing in a stage play in Arizona. On the day of his death, he missed a scheduled lunch. His co-star, Victoria Ann Berry, concerned, went to check on him. What she found would haunt her and the nation for years. Crane's skull had been crushed twice with what was suspected to be a heavy tripod. An electrical cord was wrapped around his neck. There were no signs of forced entry, no stolen items, just a brutal, intimate slaughter. The implication was chilling. This wasn't a random break-in. This was someone he knew. Suspicion immediately fell on Carpenter. He had flown into town just days before. Blood smears matching Crane's blood type were found inside Carpenter's rental car. It looked damning, but without DNA testing, which wasn't yet available, prosecutors hesitated. No murder weapon, no confession, just shadows and suspicion. For over a decade, the case lay cold. Until 1990, advances in forensic science breathed new life into the investigation. A forgotten photo from the crime scene resurfaced, showing what appeared to be brain tissue in Carpenter's car. The sample itself, gone. But the image was enough. In 1992, Carpenter was arrested. At trial in 1994, Bob Crane's own son, Scotty, took the stand. He told the court his father had been trying to cut ties with Carpenter, calling him an unwanted presence. Prosecutors argued that Carpenter, angry and abandoned, snapped. that he killed Crane in a jealous, bitter rage, but the defense came prepared. Witnesses claimed the two were seen dining happily just the night before. They pointed out the obvious: no murder weapon, degraded evidence, and more than a few potential suspects: jealous lovers, angry husbands, enemies from Crane's past. In the end, it wasn't enough. Carpenter was acquitted. He died in 1998, still insisting he was innocent. It was February 13, 2007, in Montevideo, Uruguay. 18-year-old Eliana Ramos had been living with her grandmother, quietly, away from the flashing lights of cameras. That day, her grandmother opened the bedroom door to a chilling sight. Eliana was lying curled up on her bed, eyes wide open. She wasn't breathing. There was no struggle, no sound, just stillness and the unbearable truth. She had died alone. This wasn't the first tragedy to strike the Ramos family. Only 6 months earlier, her older sister Luisel had collapsed backstage at Montevideo Fashion Week. She had just finished walking the runway and was heading off stage when she fell. Paramedics declared her dead at 9:15 p.m. The cause? Heart failure. She was 22, and she was starving. Luisel had grown up in a disciplined athletic household. Her father had played in the 1966 FIFA World Cup. Her mother was a gym teacher, but in fashion, that foundation meant little. Luisel stood 5 9 inches and had the look agencies wanted, but she was told, "You need to be thinner," and she listened. In her final months, reports say she ate mostly lettuce and drank Diet Coke. Her BMI dropped to 14.5, far below the World Health Organization's limit of 16 for severe thinness. At the time of her death, she weighed only 96 pounds. Her death sent shockwaves through the fashion industry. Born in 1988, Eliana began modeling at 16. She signed with Argentina's Dotto Models and traveled widely: Buenos Aires, Tokyo, Montevideo. She and Luisel even modeled together in Japan. Her career was gaining momentum. She stood 5'7", but after her sister's death, everything changed. Friends said she was devastated, withdrawn. She lost weight rapidly. Some said it was grief. Others believed she was still trying to meet the same brutal standards that killed her sister. On February 13th, Eliana was staying with her grandparents. Her grandmother later said she saw no warning signs. Eliana hadn't complained, but when she opened the bedroom door, it was too late. Her granddaughter was gone. Doctors again cited heart failure from malnutrition, just like her sister. Just like Brazilian model Ana Carolina Reston, who had died 3 months earlier from the same cause. Eliana's agency denied any connection to eating disorders, claiming genetics might be to blame, but medical experts disagreed. The diagnosis was clear. Her body had given up.
50 years ago this week, actress Sharon Tate was murdered along with 4 friends in her Los Angeles home. The murders were among 7 carried out over 2 nights in the city by followers of cult leader Charles.
In the summer of 1969, a nightmare crept into Los Angeles. The illusion of safety shattered overnight. What seemed like a random act of cruelty quickly revealed itself as something far worse: a calculated killing spree orchestrated by a manipulative madman. Over 2 nights, 7 lives were taken. The brutality was unthinkable. The names of the victims would become infamous, but their killers even more so. On the night of August 8th, 4 figures moved silently through the Hollywood Hills: Charles Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian. They weren't lost or high. They were soldiers, following the orders of Charles Manson, a failed musician turned cult leader who had twisted a commune into a deadly following. Their target: 10050 Cielo Drive. The house once belonged to music producer Terry Melcher, who had rejected Manson's music. Now someone else lived there, someone who had nothing to do with him. Inside was actress Sharon Tate, 8.5 months pregnant, newly married to director Roman Polanski. She was with close friends: celebrity hairstylist Jay Sebring, coffee heiress Abigail Folger, screenwriter Wojciech Frykowski, and 18-year-old Stephen Parent. None of them would live to see the morning. After midnight, Watson cut the phone lines. They scaled the fence, calm and deliberate. Stephen Parent was the first to die. He sat in his car, preparing to leave. Watson approached, slashed him, and shot him 4 times. Cold, precise. Inside, Frykowski was asleep on the couch. Watson broke in through a window and let the others inside. Frykowski was kicked awake, and the group gathered the rest of the house. Tate and Sebring were tied together by the neck with a rope suspended from the ceiling. When Sebring objected to their treatment of Tate, Watson shot him and stabbed him 7 times. Abigail Folger handed over the $70 in her purse, but it made no difference. She was dragged outside and stabbed 28 times. Frykowski tried to flee but was shot, bludgeoned, and stabbed, minus 51 times in total. The attack was so violent that Watson's gun broke. Sharon Tate begged for her life and for her unborn child. She offered to be taken hostage, but her pleas meant nothing. She was stabbed 16 times and still alive when they hanged her with the rope. Her cause of death? Massive hemorrhage. Before leaving, Atkins smeared the word pig on the front door in Tate's blood. It was a message, a misdirection. Manson wanted the murders to look like the beginning of a race war, what he called helter-skelter. The next night, Manson went with them. He led the group to the home of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, ordinary people chosen at random. Manson tied up Leno, then left. Inside, Watson stabbed him repeatedly, starting with his throat, and carved the word war into his stomach. Rosemary fought back but was overwhelmed, stabbed 41 times by 3 attackers. Their home became a slaughterhouse. In 2 nights, 7 people were dead. The city was paralyzed with fear. The randomness, the cruelty, the apparent lack of motive, it didn't make sense. For days, police couldn't connect the dots, but soon the truth began to surface. Manson and his followers were arrested. Charles Manson, Tex Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, Susan Atkins, and Leslie Van Houten were charged. Their trial became a spectacle. They carved X's into their foreheads. They smirked, showed no remorse. All were convicted and sentenced to death. But in 1972, the California Supreme Court ruled the death penalty unconstitutional. Their sentences were reduced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. It was a quiet Thursday evening, February 25, 2010, in the small New Zealand town of Invercargill. Inside a modest family home, something felt off. Christopher Hodkinson called out for his partner, Natasha Harris, but no answer came. The bathroom door was ajar. When he stepped inside, everything changed. Natasha was slumped against the wall, her skin pale, her breath shallow and slipping away. Christopher's voice cracked with panic as he called emergency services, but by the time help arrived, the life had already drained from her. Just like that, she was gone. She was only 30 years old, a mother of 8, a partner of 15 years, the kind of woman who spent days planning birthday parties down to the last candle. As the initial shock faded and the coroner's inquest began, the world learned something it wasn't ready to hear. Natasha didn't die from drugs or alcohol or some undiagnosed condition. What killed her was Coca-Cola, not in a single sip, not in one bad batch, but in the slow, relentless grip of addiction. An addiction that masqueraded as something harmless. It began in her teens, just a glass or 2. Nothing alarming, but the years passed, and the glasses turned into bottles, then liters, then an unimaginable truth. By the end, Natasha was drinking up to 10 liters of Coke a day. That's about 18 pints every single day. Her life ran on Coke. She woke up with it, ended the day with it. Without it, she felt shaky, irritable, unwell. Her family noticed the signs long before they understood what they meant. Her mother-in-law recalled how anxious she'd become when the fridge ran low. She was constantly nauseous, exhausted, dizzy. She vomited nearly every day. Everyone assumed it was stress or something else, but no one looked at the bottle in her hand. Inside her body, a quiet war was being waged. Her teeth had rotted to the point of removal. One of her children was even born without enamel, a condition doctors believed was linked to Natasha's extreme Coke intake during pregnancy. Her liver, enlarged and fatty, choked by sugar. And then there was her heart, the organ that finally gave out. Natasha had dangerously low potassium levels, a condition known as hypokalemia. Her caffeine intake made it worse. Her heart was overstimulated, unbalanced, and vulnerable. On the day she died, she mentioned feeling a little off, not in pain, not desperate, just off. Hours later, she collapsed. And the damage that had taken years to build finally claimed her life. The coroner's report was unflinching. Without that daily flood of Coke, Natasha Harris would still be alive. The sugar, the caffeine, the potassium crash, it all added up. Coca-Cola Oceania issued a statement offering sympathy, but insisting there was no conclusive evidence their product caused her death. They argued that people are responsible for their own consumption, but the coroner saw it differently. He urged Coca-Cola to put caffeine content on their labels to warn consumers about overconsumption. He asked New Zealand's Ministry of Health to consider new regulations for caffeinated beverages. And still, the question hung in the air. Would it have changed anything? Because Natasha's story isn't just about soda. It's about what happens when exhaustion, poverty, and pain collide, and something easy, something sweet becomes a lifeline. Her sister Raylene said it best. For some people, it's drugs. For others, alcohol. For Natasha, it was Coke. That's how she coped. She gave everything to her kids, skipped meals to make sure they ate, laughed with them, sacrificed for them, and quietly her body unraveled from the inside out. No one realized how far gone things were until until it was too late. After her death, the family she built began to fracture. Christopher, crushed by grief, tried to raise the children alone, but the pressure mounted. Emotionally, financially, he couldn't keep up. Eventually, the children were taken into state care. Christopher's life spiraled into legal battles and despair.
My name is Dal Kim. I'm from Seoul. Today you're going to go around New York with me. We're going to go to Chinatown.
It was November 19th, 2009, in Paris, France. The streets of the 10th arrondissement were quiet, unaware of the tragedy unfolding inside one modest apartment. Inside, 20-year-old model Dal Kim, one of South Korea's brightest rising stars in fashion, was lying unresponsive. Just the night before, she had posted one final blog entry, hauntingly titled, "Say Hi to Forever." Along with it, she shared a video for a song called "I Go Deep" by Jim Rivers. Hours later, her boyfriend found her. It was already too late. Dal Kim wasn't just another face in the modeling world. She was already a global phenomenon. She had walked for Chanel, Dries Van Noten, Maison Martin Margiela. Her striking features, pale blonde hair, and androgynous aura had turned her into a fashion muse in New York, Milan, London, and Paris. Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, H&M, Gap, Topshop, her image was everywhere. She had been crowned Model of the Year by Korea's Anan magazine in 2008. But beneath the surface of that glamorous success, Dal was slowly unraveling. The public saw her as bold, edgy, and enigmatic. But privately, she was drowning in emotional exhaustion and an aching loneliness that fame couldn't fix. Born May 31st, 1989, in Seoul, she spent much of her youth between South Korea and Singapore. A creative soul through and through, Dal painted, made experimental video art, and even held a solo art exhibition in 2007. She had a small star tattooed on her hand. Her humor was dry, often biting. Her blog, darkly titled "I Like to Fork Myself," became a digital diary that offered a window into her spiraling mind. In one 2007 post, she wrote, "I'm going to smash my face. My life as Dal is so miserable and lonely. I love you all." Then, almost reflexively, she edited the post to add, "Kidding, I'm fine, just tired." But the cracks in the facade were clear. These weren't attention-seeking rants. They were distress signals, scattered across the web, buried between Fashion Week updates and photo shoots. Even when surrounded by flashing cameras, makeup artists, and adoring fans, Dal confessed to feeling invisible. Her agency calls went unanswered. She couldn't sleep. The endless flights between Seoul, Paris, New York, and Tokyo had turned her into something more like a ghost than a girl. In October 2009, barely a month before her death, she blogged, "The more I gain, the more lonely it is. I know I'm like a ghost." Days later, she wrote, "Mad, depressed, and overworked." She was 20 and already tired of it all. Still, her career kept climbing. Campaigns for Topshop, Chanel, magazine covers in Australia, Russia, Korea. From the outside, she was a dream realized. On the inside, she was slipping. In a blog post dated October 15th, she questioned her entire existence. Freedom comes with such cost, but is it even freedom? There must be something wrong from the core. She had just returned from Seoul Fashion Week when she posted her final video. Then came the goodbye. Authorities said she left a note. The exact contents were never made public. But her agency issued a brief, cold message. She was a top model, a great friend, and that was it. But for those who had followed her, not just her modeling, but her words, her thoughts, her cries for help, the news hit like a punch to the chest. Her blog became a digital grave, overflowing with messages from strangers who felt like they knew her. She wasn't just beautiful. She was honest, unfiltered, human. In South Korea, her death wasn't just another headline. It opened wounds, conversations. She was the 9th public figure to die that year. Experts began pointing to the crushing weight of cultural expectations, the stigma around mental health, and the sheer lack of emotional support in industries like modeling and entertainment.